Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you also on my behalf. Tonight's panel is called EU Enlargement at a Turning Point. And I hope that in this discussion, so in the next 1 hour, 15 minutes, we'll be able to answer this question. So is the enlargement really a turning point? And what exactly does it mean in practice for citizens in the region, and especially in Serbia? So without further ado, let us begin with the questions. Let's find some answers if possible. Mr. Blockmans, how would you see, do we have reasons for optimism when it comes to enlargement? Do we finally see this momentum actually happening? Is political will in the EU strong enough to actually overcome all the obstacles on this path? Or, are we maybe too optimistic to expect new members in this decade?
I think there's good news to be shared. There is certainly a new energy in the EU enlargement policy, in as far as it relates to what the European Commission has called its key enlargement partners. These are 4 member state or candidate countries, basically. Moldova has, in the assessment of the European Commission in its annual report, made the biggest leap, albeit from quite a low base from last year. Montenegro has massively impressed, with closing chapters and with making progress on reforms and many others. Ukraine and Albania too have been noted for their fast advancement. So this is positive news and gives an energy to the enlargement process where it was long lacking. The second point of optimism is that the European Commission is actively or proactively even supporting them. And these gradual integration mechanisms that the ambassador talked about are pathways to basically open up the benefits for future membership at an earlier stage, pre-accession access to parts of the single market, for example. There, the proof of the pudding will be in its eating. We'll have to see whether there's credible evidence to support the claim that this will also accelerate the formal accession process. And thirdly, I think there is a formal but important acknowledgement by the European Commission of the expectations of the 4 frontrunners in setting the target dates for closing negotiations with the European Union. Montenegro by 2026, Albania by 2027, Moldova at the beginning of 28, and Ukraine by the end of 28. That may be optimistic, indeed, perhaps a bit too much, but we can discuss that later. The fact that the European Commission at least acknowledges this and is willing to support those countries if they keep up the pace of reforms, in the case of Montenegro and Albania, or if they accelerate reforms from Moldova and Ukraine, is positive. The technical process, however, needs to be matched with political willingness, both in EU member states and at candidate country level. In the member states, this is by and large present. There are difficult negotiations at the moment to come up with the Council conclusions in December, which will probably be endorsed by the European Council heads of state, heads of government. We know that there is one holdout state, in particular Hungary, of course, vis-à-vis Ukraine, but there may be others who are hiding behind Hungary, or that might, come out of the cupboard for other reasons. This is not to say that the immediate steps that the European Commission has recommended to the member states will be scuppered, partially perhaps for Ukraine, and that the rest of the momentum will be lost. No, I think there will be this momentum going forward. But of course, pushing problems further down the line may come with a reckoning at a later stage. The popular sentiment in member states is still positive, 56% on average, according to the special Eurobarometer poll of September, in support of EU enlargement. But the variations between member states are big, and there's a lot to work for, with a tendency of, in particular, radical right parties dismissing the future enlargement of the European Union. And so more strategic communication, as was mentioned, dispelling false information is clearly needed if referenda will need to be won. And France in particular is of course a big game in that respect. So is it then realistic to expect accession by the end of this decade? Yes, we can close the negotiations. I think that's a realistic assessment as endorsed by the European Commission. If you then take an extra 18 months, which it took for Croatia to get its accession treaty ratified in all of the member states and its own country and the European Parliament, then it's a realistic assessment that Montenegro might join, perhaps Albania, before 2030. But as I mentioned, there are still a couple of bears on the road.
But is this good news for the rest? So not for these 4 countries, but for the rest. It can also bring frustration. It can also somehow make these countries feel left behind. Like, is there a danger of this development as well?
Well, the European Commission has been quite clearer than before, I think, in its language, and we just heard it from the EU ambassador, I think, as well. Serbia, which is facing this paradox at the moment, political situation, increased deepening political polarization, which is impacting negatively, of course, its enlargement process and the speed of reforms that is required, and totally out of sync with the geopolitical needs of the moment, needs to make a choice. Other laggards are facing domestic problems which are bigger. Bosnia-Herzegovina and Kosovo's problems are well known. After the return of VMRO in North Macedonia, you see a lack of reform in that country too. And as far as Georgia and Turkey are concerned, I think we can safely forget about any enlargement in the future. The Commission spells out explicitly that Georgia is a candidate country only in name. And as far as Turkey is concerned, well, avenues are being found outside of the enlargement process to strengthen a strategic partnership.
Thank you very much. Mr. Reuten, what is your perspective as a member of parliament? Do you see this thing happening, so Albania and Montenegro joining in this decade?
Well, I said also, by the way, nice to be here. Good to see you all here. I said also in our most recent election campaign for the European elections in the Netherlands that if you ask me, we need a positive signal when it comes to enlargement. And back then, in 24, we were not where we are now. There's clearly a shift in opinion, in attitude around enlargement. But I said we need 2 countries to join before 2030. And I don't have any preference, I said back then in the election campaign. We need it because we need a signal towards the cynicals, towards the cynical people, towards the Kremlin, towards also the president of this country. Because there are so many people who like to see us fail. There are many more people that like to see us fail than we probably can imagine. So I'm glad that the European Union understood after the full-scale invasion, and it took a bit more time, me and my colleague Joveva, but many others in the European Parliament are asking for this for years, a new momentum for enlargement, but in the right way. So I'm glad that they understood that we needed to regain credibility of the process. And so far, we seem to have managed to break some deadlocks, but I still see too little action. So yes, I'm very positive, but the concrete action, the concrete commitment, not only to say you have to do this, 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 and this, and then maybe 28, maybe 29. No, the real commitment also from all these capitals, that's what I'm saying all the time when I'm traveling here in the region or in Moldova or in Ukraine. Ultimately, we need 27 capitals to agree. And that is going to be a challenge, but I think that one of the reasons why we see this lack of action, also around Albania and Montenegro, is that people are still not convinced that it's necessary to do it now, that it's necessary to make this step. And on the date, it's always the same. Giving a concrete date too soon breaks the reform pace. If you are too late, you lose the support. North Macedonia is a case in point. So we still have a lot of work to do. But I'm mildly optimistic about the prospect of at least having 1 or 2 countries joining before 2030, possibly even more. But we will need to work hard for that.
So you see that progress of these 2 or 4 countries is going to be some kind of impetus for others to join or to recognize that this opportunity is indeed genuine?
Well, I think it was a smart move by Commissioner Kos to talk about 4 front runners. Also, the language immediately makes people alert and say, okay, so who's the front runner then? I'm not saying that we will re-enter the regatta model or anything, but sure, it is positive that there by now the Commission also dares to be a bit more explicit in who has tough choices to make and who is going in the right direction. By all means, we are not there yet, also with Moldova, which I hugely applaud for the progress they have made, but they still are not as far as others, but they made the biggest progress. It is inventive, and it is also positive, I think, that the Commission came up with this kind of dynamics, identifying between countries that have made the most progress. But then again, I also have to mention again North Macedonia. They have not made as much progress, but that's also not entirely their own fault. So it's also very important to keep the commitment very specific on very specific candidate countries. And there are huge challenges ahead of us. I already mentioned the 27 capitals that have to agree. If we look at the world as it is today, if we look at what we are facing in terms of hybrid threats, of course we can expect huge disinformation campaigns in every country that has to make a decision about ratifying the treaty. So please, we need more energy, more commitment to this entire process. It's not 2008 or 1999 anymore. We are facing a big challenge, but it can be done if we show the right commitment.
Thank you very much. Ms. Joveva, first to congratulate you on yesterday's Lighthouse Awards. Congratulations. Yes. And to follow up on what Mr. Reuten said, basically, am I wrong to say that the European Parliament is pretty much in favor of enlargement, pushing forward for enlargement, you personally as well? But do you think that there is similar kind of political will in other EU institutions? And among member states, of course.
Good afternoon. First of all, it's really a pleasure being here to be able to speak about this very important issue. Some of us know that for years. Some of them know that maybe now a little bit more than before. Traditionally, the European Parliament was always the most vocal regarding enlargement. Actually, also in this mandate, even though we have a lot of difficulties regarding the working or cooperation with the extremists, that we do have a lot more than we did in the previous mandate. But the topic on enlargement as such, there was always a consensus about that it has to be done, actually, that it's the only way forward. I'm speaking about the European Parliament, okay? And now to the question, to the other European institutions. European Commission, I think, I have to say, not because she's from Slovenia, not because I know her and she's, a colleague and a friend of mine, but we truly are very lucky to have Commissioner Kos as a commissioner for enlargement, especially if we compare this commissioner with the previous one coming from Hungary. We all know how that went.
Easy to do better, eh?
Yeah, it is. It is because of the geopolitical situation, but still, we all know what was happening in the previous mandates regarding also Serbia. And Orban's commissioner, I can say that with no hesitation. But the European Commission now really seems to have more political will. Of course, we have to be blunt and say it's not because of the Western Balkans, unfortunately. It's because of the geopolitical situation as such and the world as such. I'm speaking about Ukraine. But nevertheless, I mean, why shouldn't we or the Western Balkans use this as an opportunity too? Now, it's also a tradition that the member states, as the third institution or the council, are kind of the most conservative when we speak about enlargement. Of course, they see it through different lens. Some of them are, more nationalistic, also putting some bilateral issues inside that shouldn't be there. I'm speaking about Bulgaria, so that you all understand. But the political will, I still see also that there's more also regarding, you're from Netherlands, so Netherlands is one of the countries or the member states that's hopefully, changing the direction at least a little bit. If we compare it with a few years before, or even France maybe, we all remember, I think we all remember the 2019 and the decision that was made by the President Macron regarding especially the Macedonian state, which actually was a turning point in a negative way for the Macedonian state. And I believe that that's why there's no concrete reforms that are needed. But one can understand why this is happening. But now, as I said, this is a momentum, there is a political will, but we have to be aware that we cannot afford one Orban more, inside the European Union. It's not perfect, and we have a lot of problems with some leaders, and we cannot afford to have someone just because, so one leader more to block everything because he can or she can, whatever. So we need to do also internal reforms inside the European Union. We are speaking about that a lot lately, but I see no concrete action regarding that, or maybe not even a realistic one. That's an unfortunate thing, but I really do believe that this should go hand in hand. So internal reforms inside the European Union, and of course the enlargement process, I think it should and it could go hand in hand. But the candidate countries especially have to use this momentum and the political will that is here, not because of the European Union, but because of the citizens that are living here and deserve a better future. And I think that we should do everything in our power to explain to them that the European Union is the best alternative that they have. I can say that also for my country and for Slovenia, that I cannot imagine be anywhere else regarding the future and the better future as it is in the European Union.
The European Parliament wasn't only vocal about enlargement, defending enlargement, but also defending European values in the enlargement countries. Since we know that the main driver of enlargement right now is the war in Ukraine and the need of the EU to enlarge, to defend itself, basically. Is the European Parliament going to manage, basically, to enforce that European values are indeed defended and protected throughout the enlargement process?
Well, we are also vocal very much about that. We are, speaking about it very much, a lot. I see selectiveness here when we speak about European values, I'm not speaking about the European Parliament. I think European Parliament is actually a saving face more or less all the time, especially regarding the European values. But the other institutions are kind of, selectively choosing or, picking where they will put those European values and where maybe it's not that important because some other interests are more important. We saw that also in Serbia, especially regarding the relationship with the President of the Commission, Mrs. von der Leyen, with the President of Serbia, but not only that. But the European Parliament will definitely remain vocal here, and I think that the pressure has already been done, and we will just continue, European values are not for sale, never, and it shouldn't be selective. So.
Thank you very much. Ms. Mandić, can this EU political will for enlargement be seen here in Serbia? And has the EU approach been radically different in the past couple of years since we can start talking about this momentum?
Thank you for your question. Good evening, everyone. I will speak from the local perspective, from perspective of local citizen and civil society organizations in general. And I think that the answer to your question of how this message that we just heard, even from the ambassador, that he really briefly and openly said, you're part of the EU family, the door are open or remain open, that this really depends who is actually who is receiving this message. I think that we from the civil society who are in constant communication with the EU representatives and EU member states representatives and also politicians who are directly delivered this message, that they can hear that there is this serious change from the previous commission to this commission's attitude towards enlargement. But I think that that's one side of the story. Let's call it that way, but I think that the average citizens are not hearing this message enough. So why is that the case? I think that freedom of media that we've been mentioning before is one of the reasons, because this is not breaking news in national media. This is not even the national broadcaster, not to speak about the private televisions with the national broadcasting powers. So I would say that yes, us who are closer to the fire, let's say so, we are absolutely aware of this change and we are really supporting this change, but I think that the average citizen, and that's not my personal opinion, I think that we can see that from the public polls, and that actually this 33%, I think, of support of EU accession, so the historical lowest support to EU accession is also showing that people, ordinary people, are not hearing this message enough. And I would also, if you allow me, Nikola, I would maybe just slightly intervene with this statement that we can hear. We need political will, and this is your choice whether you want to join or not. I'm a lawyer, and maybe that's my professional problem, how I look at this statement, but both EU and Serbia have contractual obligations. So we mutually said to each other that we will try to, especially Serbia, to get closer to the EU, to EU values, to EU norms, to EU way of life. So I think that we already made this decision, and that we shouldn't leave additional space for this government, these current authorities or some future authorities to say whether they want or not. So we are in the process. We definitely want, at least formally. And I think that that's just a tricky statement to say, you know, that the door is open, so you choose. I think we already chose, and if we are changing our minds, we should do that formally, or at least discuss it, because it's really concerning that only 1/3 of our citizens are currently supporting EU accession. And I will finish with that. I think we started in 2001 with over two-thirds of people supporting the EU accession. So within 25 years, we came like from 75, or I think it was even 78, to 33. So I think, you know, we should all sit and think how is this possible, and what actually brought Serbian citizens to this lack of trust actually in the EU. So I think this is a good message that we hear, but I think that unfortunately we are somehow missing each other. So when we wanted to enter, when we had this huge enthusiasm, the EU was, you know, saying, okay, hold on, we'll see. But now when the EU is more optimistic about this, we are saying, hey, hold on, we'll see. So, yeah.
So, many Serbian citizens doubt that it is actually possible to join the EU. Many are skeptical of the possibility that Serbia, whatever it does, could actually join the Union. Do you think that if Albania and Montenegro make progress towards EU membership or join the next 3 or 4 years, that this could actually be a sign, evidence to Serbian citizens that enlargement actually is happening, and that if it's not happening for Serbia, then it's the fault of the Serbian government?
Well, I think that conclusion is already there. Like we're stuck in the EU process for 4 years. I think that protests in the streets, so we are sitting here, but, things are happening outside of this room, and people are protesting, asking for justice, for the rule of law. I think that Serbian citizens already know who's to blame for lack of reforms in this country. But I think definitely if somebody else from the region joins, yeah, definitely that would be a message. It is possible because I think for a long period of time, even in these public polls, people were saying that, there may be, maybe they would vote for joining the EU, but they're not sure that EU actually wants us. So I think that what you just posed as a question would show for the people who are not directly in front of the media or sources of information to hear this message that we just heard, that they would, from experience see that actually EU is ready to accept Serbia also, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Back to Mr. Blockmans. When we're talking about the EU itself, how will the EU become ready for enlargement? We have heard some proposals for reforming decision-making in the EU. Now, we recently also heard about some kind of new accession rules for the countries who are going to join next. Do you think that there is some kind of a solution on the table, and what do you expect to happen?
Yeah, let me start with a point on the enlargement package. I mean, we were quite positive in our initial assessment. Now comes the glass half-empty phase of our conversation. To me, the big omission in the Commission's own reporting was indeed, the much touted, long promised, and long overdue in-depth policy and governance reviews in order to prepare the European Union for further enlargement. We were promised this in the first 100 days of the second von der Leyen Commission. All we got was a placeholder, a communication which you could print on a T-shirt. All we got is a T-shirt. We are more than 300 days later, or, well, not later, but we're more than 300 days into this Commission's tender, and we are told in the enlargement reports that these reviews will come soon. The EU has to practice what it's preaching to the candidate countries. It should, if it wants to be credible in applying conditionality on a consistent basis, also make its own reforms and put out the proposals for the member states, of course, to discuss and to decide upon. I hope that soon means before the end of this year, because after that, I think it becomes a bit, well, the credibility of the European Commission is eroded, basically, by these delays. And as such, the EU's negotiating position with the candidate countries. Now, it is true that on enlargement methodology, adaptations have been made on the go. Since the revised methodology in February 2020 was adopted, we've seen the European Commission advancing technical work, trying to work around what has become a practice, a bad habit of unanimity voting for each intermediate step of the pre-accession process. It has simply gone on and do the work based on the mandate it received from the Council to negotiate with candidate countries. And in fact, there is no legal, I'm also a lawyer, there's no legal commitment at all or obligation for the European Commission to litter all of these intermediate steps and lace them with unanimity voting. The beginning and the end, opening and closing, determining the conditions for accession treaty for sure is dependent on unanimity, but all the rest can be dismissed in my view. COELA, the working group which deals with, in the Council, which deals with enlargement, has also adapted its working procedures a little bit, but this is tinkering around the margins to my mind. Commissioner Kos, now also in the enlargement reports, have initiated the idea for some type of probation period for new member states. Not being really clear what it means. We heard stronger rule of law safeguards, more efficient reversibility mechanisms so as to claw back benefits which have been accrued over time thanks to reforms, but which on merit should be lost. But these details need to be fleshed out. We've seen the German-Slovenian non-paper on mainstreaming qualified majority voting in council decision-making. This will not get anywhere if it doesn't get the full backing of the member states, even if 16 or 20 member states currently back it. We've seen a German proposal, not officially launched, I think, but to temporarily suspend veto powers of new member states in the council, which I think is a brilliant idea. In fact, I wrote about it and suggested it 2 years ago in the context of the stage accession model, which, together with a sister think tank here in Belgrade, we've pitched, and where the Commission has taken up bits and pieces over time, most notably in the form of gradual integration mechanisms, which we structured horizontally, and the Commission is trying to impose vertically into very isolated and limited spaces of the single market. Roaming, wonderful for Ukraine and Moldova as the 1st of January. CEPA for 4 countries, including Albania and North Macedonia and Montenegro and the Western Balkans, is wonderful if it doesn't come with new fees for people that they will have to pay for banks in order to get their remittances from EU-based relatives, or pay for university fees for their children inside the European Union. So we'll have to see there where there's really evidence that this works, as I mentioned before. And then, there are some contradictory signals, I think still. These ideas are good, to my mind, insufficient. The enlargement policy has been made more complex over the last couple of years, despite the European Commission and President von der Leyen's simplification agenda in many other domains. I think the enlargement policy would be an excellent candidate to simplify. And getting rid of unanimity, of course, in intermediate steps would be a starter. I think the enlargement reports, as were published just a few days ago, have gained in importance again, in credibility, in political relevance in a way, and should be the annual thermometer on the basis of which new predictions or prescriptions are made for the candidate states. And I think it should be made more transparent by morphing all of these bilateral tracks which have come up over the last years in the context of gradual integration, and add to the diplomatic qualification of progress, some progress, moderate progress, good progress, a hard-hitting quantified rating system which makes it absolutely clear where countries stand. To my mind, I find it incredible to note, trying to decipher or to rate basically all of this coded language into ratings, that Serbia has stagnated, yes, has slowed down reforms, whereas the perception is completely different. The perception is about regression, about backsliding, and this is not visible in the Commission's report and could be brought out.
Thank you very much. Mr. Reuten, do you see this as a challenge? Do you think that there is political will in the EU to actually undergo this reform, to make enlargement happen? Is there also a threat of, let's say, far right or those political forces who are against enlargement of maybe taking power or strengthening in the EU? So what do you see the main challenges from this EU side?
Well, I in recent discussions about defense and increasing our security, I heard I think it was a French general speaking, and he said that every time he gets asked, what kind of capabilities are you missing? What kind of weapons are you missing? He says, no, none of that. I want political will. So if only we could buy somewhere political will, that would massively help also in this debate, because many of the challenges also Steven is pointing at, the relatively simple one of the whole process cut up in 100 decisions having to be taken by unanimity. And he is right, it's not in the treaties, it's not an obligation, it's a voluntary subjection to this kind of thinking. we could solve it. We can solve it without even going into the full-scale treaty revision. And there are many other things that we can do without going through a lengthy, possibly complex reform. So political will, fears based on past experiences. I want to maybe also link what Sofija said, because yes, she is right, of course, that there is a treaty obligation already taken by Serbia to move towards a closer relationship with the European Union. That is not meaningless. At the same time, we have seen over the past years that every time representatives of Serbia came back to Belgrade, they started to decredibilize and the whole process and the EU itself. So being asked by people also in the Netherlands or in other countries where we speak, yeah, are you not surprised that people are not waving European flags in Novi Sad at the protests? No, I'm not. I actually understand the Serbian people very well, because if you see this European Union that you once aspired to when the support was still 78, 80%, if you see the representatives of that union cozying up, dear Alexander, fantastic progress being made. If you see that every day, then you will lose your faith in that institution. So yes, again, we have a lot of work to do, but it is possible. And I think that indeed the Commission has seen the light a little bit, because they have started to embark on a new kind of communication, it seems. But this is clearly not enough to break the deadlock of years. It's clearly not enough to convince 27 member states. For that, we need the political will. We also need some kind of difficult puzzle. There needs to be a difficult puzzle needs to be made, because there will always be countries to be found that don't like the one or the other candidate that is ready. There will always be countries to be found that will say, yes, but without reforms, we cannot do it. And they either use it as an excuse not to have countries accept it, or they use it as an excuse for not doing anything at all. Whichever way you look at it, and we share the same opinion on the so-called French proposal back in 22, it was, I think, 21, June 21 on North Macedonia. The intention of that is not to get a success. The intention of that is to prolong the process, and that is what we need to get rid of. But the call for reforms, yes, they can be done in various ways. They can be done in a targeted form at every treaty of accession. So you can use several accession treaties to do reforms, but it's also ridiculous, on the other hand, to say that we cannot accommodate one or two smaller new member states as a sign of success, as a sign of stimulus, a stimulus for other countries to do the job, to make sure that also the people here in Serbia will see that it pays off if you do your work, if you do your homework. It's ridiculous to use the reform as an excuse for that, because there's a lot of criticism possible on the EU's functioning today, and that will not become any worse with Montenegro being part of the EU. Yes, if we come to the bigger countries, if we come to Ukraine, even Serbia, we need to adjust a few things. But we cannot have the accession or the whole process being hijacked by the other elephant in the room, the reform, and in particular not a full-scale treaty reform, of which I'm in favor. Let's be clear, I'm in favor of a full-scale treaty reform, but I don't want the accession process to be hijacked by that. And one small remark on new avenues, like Steven has been working on the staged accession, and yes, I've also seen that they have used elements of that in Moldova, in Ukraine, positive, but not in the way it was intended. Yes, maybe a couple of years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, I would have been very much against all these kind of models. But I became more model agnostic. I want a success. I want a success. We need this success. We need to have a signal, a point at the horizon, 1 or 2 countries before 2030, maybe more, but we need a success. So I became less, how do you say that, principled.
More tolerant.
On the model or on whatever. I mean, there's one thing that I still cannot get my head around, and that is a real second rank membership or whatever people call it. Yes, gradual, staged, whatever, fine. But the final objective needs to be that we create this stronger bloc, this stronger European family, which can act at a world stage, which does not have that black hole anymore in this region where we are now, that also links up with Ukraine, our strong ally of the moment. So we need to work harder.
Thank you very much.
Sorry for taking...
No. Ms. Joveva, do you think that the candidate countries recognize this momentum, and can it drive them actually towards democratization? We know that democratization is one of the preconditions for EU membership, but the time for democracy on a global level is not really favorable. So do you think that enlargement can still achieve this goal?
True. Democracy is in crisis. Everyone sees that except the ones who are being manipulated by the politicians also, who are the ones that are putting the democracy as such in crisis. I mean, we have to, take Trump, but not only Trump. We have leaders or politicians like that in every single country, but just some of the countries are fortunate enough not to have them as leaders. Some of the countries are not fortunate enough. Example, we are sitting in, or we are now in a country that's not fortunate in that way. So obviously, the democracy is in crisis. But, it still exists, so we have to make or put more efforts to preserve the democratic norms and to prove that it can be not in crisis, that we still live in democracy, or at least that we wish to live in democracy, because, you always feel the benefits of something when you lose it or when it's in danger. So I think the same thing is happening now with everything that's been going on. So yes, I hope that the candidate countries are seeing this as a momentum for the democratization, but not only for the sake of getting in the European Union, primarily for the functioning of their own state. The protests that are happening now in Serbia there are demands that are practically identical to the demands that the European Union is asking from, the Serbia or the regime or the leaders in Serbia. So, we are seeing, here in Serbia, we are seeing that glimpse of hope that can materialize, hopefully. We'll see what happened, but the question is, if it will lead to a political change, or will it lead to more nationalization or even more polarization, or pro-China or pro-Russia even. So we were speaking about the decline of, support for the European Union, so I think it's also we didn't do the homework, I guess. And we have to, also repair our mistakes that were made, and to regain. I don't think that we have credibility at this moment as a European Union in the Western Balkans, and we have to regain it. So we also are the ones who have to seize this momentum, not only the candidate countries, but maybe even more the European Union as such.
Thank you very much. Ms. Mandić, the EU has significantly changed its rhetoric, let's say, towards Serbia in the past 6, 7 or 8 months. There is now a lot more talk about the necessity to not only adopt reform, but also implement them in practice. But at the same time, now with these 2 legal changes that are very important for Serbia's EU accession, namely the appointment of the members of the regulatory body for electronic media and the law on voter register, the EU has been criticized a lot for supporting something which was seen as a fraudulent process by one part of society here. So how do you see this? Like, did EU really change its approach? Can it be visible? Like, how can it be assessed?
Okay.
Hard question, I know.
Yeah. At some point, a few years ago, I remember that the EU said we will not regard or we will not value normative changes as necessarily enough to progress in EU path. And there was a lot of talking about this, I think, track record, or that was the term. I don't know where the track record was, lost. Meanwhile, maybe colleagues from the EU can tell me. But somehow we are back on that square one, where adopting the laws, being them good or bad or something in between, that is enough to, for the EU, for the Commission, for the ambassadors to say, yes, this is good, and now we expect the implementation, and then the implementation can come within a year or two or never. So I'm not avoiding your question. I just want to, have this a little bit of historical perspective on this. Somehow we got back to that first, basic element of when we were, in the process of screening and adopting the action plans and so on. That was the phase when we needed to change a lot of laws. Now, when we look at for example, related to elections, the ODIHR recommendations, the ODIHR didn't say you have to change law on unique voters registry. They said, yeah, you can change legal framework also, but you need to change the practice, and you need to implement your already existing laws. And that is what is missing. Also, and I will get back to these two examples, but I also want to give another example. For example, the law on public procurement that was changed several times in Serbia because of the EU requests, or at least that was presented as such in Serbian public, that resulted in Novi Sad case, where law on public procurement was not implemented at all. Actually, it was excluded. So the contractors, the Chinese contractors and subcontractors and subcontractors were all elected directly by the government. Why I'm mentioning all this? Because this kind of election of the contractors resulted in death of 16 people. So I'm just pointing out that some normative changes, including law on public procurement that was changed, as I said, several times, according to EU requests, just adopting or changing the law doesn't mean that something good will happen. Just the opposite, it can mean that something tragically will happen in the end. So back to these two examples, you probably are assuming what my answer would be. With the REM case, I think now it's obvious that for the third time we cannot elect people with full integrity, so the ruling party doesn't want to give up the idea of controlling majority of people in this independent body, which consequently means that the state in electronic media will stay the same, and the state of play currently is catastrophic. So, and the other example on law on unique voters registry, I think that's, in the domestic public already known, that I was speaking about that publicly and writing about that actually by adopting that law, we actually just skipped the ODIHR recommendation, the first ODIHR recommendation, because we didn't have consensus on this text. So this is the text of the Serbian Progressive Party that was adopted by the votes of Serbian Progressive Party, and also the solutions in the law are not actually providing authorities or competencies for this new Commission for audit of the unique voters registry to actually do a meaningful revision, because ODIHR said you have to do a meaningful revision of the unique voters registry. So to wrap up, I would say that we need to support the EU to ask not to give any more credits to our local leaders, and that adopting new laws is just, it's not working. And we have all possible means and mechanisms to revise the unique voters registry and to have free and fair elections right now. I just think that the EU needs to be more vocal about that. The law is not enough. I think that local authorities, they still hear and see that this free space to adopt the law, and then, you know, the implementation might come or not.
Thank you very much. Mr. Blockmans, do you see that the European Commission has actually changed its approach towards Serbia in the past year? And what do you think that the European Commission and other institutions should do when it comes to Serbia, which is facing the very deep socio-political crisis and also the mass protests?
Yes, I do see a change in tone, for sure. I mean, there was silence, complicit silence at the beginning for a couple of months. Then cautious engagements. And now there's a clear sense of frustration that, you know, seeps through the report, the annual report. There are ample references to no progress or slow down or stand still in various domains, including the fundamental ones, and, you know, appeals for political leadership, generically stated, as to take these things seriously and put Serbia back on track in this respect. But it requires more than that, I think. I mean, we should call a spade a spade, especially if meritocracy is to mean anything. And certainly we should dispense with all the references to Dear Alexander and all of that. That is not helpful. There should be much more strict tone in that respect. That would be step one. Saying things as they are being observed, and to report on them accordingly. And the second step is applying reversibility, which is part and parcel of this gradual integration mechanisms that have been introduced, withholding funds, of course, distributing them elsewhere to other candidate countries or to civil society organizations or independent media or what have you. These are the logical steps of less for less, negative conditionality that should apply. So that's what should come next, if there's no real turnaround.
Thank you. Mr. Reuten, are we right to say that now it is visible to everyone in the EU what's happening in Serbia? What is the true face of the Serbian government? Or maybe we are, you know, not really being realistic when we say that.
Well, I'm glad that years of debating in the European Parliament and saying appeasement is not working. It never worked. It doesn't work now, and it will never work. That finally it paid off. And yes, I think Commissioner Kos did a great effort. She felt also supported, I think, by the European Parliament in doing this effort, in trying to convince not only the rest of the Commission, but also the organization, the people of her team, that a different tone was needed. And I think I would advocate for the Commission now not to think, oh, well, the work is done, with some references to backsliding, with some clearer language. No, this is not the moment to back off. I'm advocating for a Commission that remains impartial. Of course, we leave it, and I think that's only fair. The Serbian people are the only ones who will have to decide on future leadership, on a new government, and so on, of course. But impartiality towards the political leadership does not mean neutrality. That's a different thing. And I think they have been confused in the past, maybe, also at the Commission level, and that resulted in, let's not take a position, let's not speak out, whereas it was very clear that the things that the students and the wider society was asking for were exactly these things that are already, that Serbia already committed to. So I think that in that respect, the statement also by the students couldn't have been more clear. They said, we don't want dialogue on the rule of law or on transparency. We want it implemented, period. So as long as that does not happen, then there's not a lot to talk about. And we also, as the students, as the society in Serbia, needs to be patient. Let me finish on one thing, because I understood it's also broadcasted live. And I got used in the past years to say, on every occasion where I speak to people and where I get the chance to speak also towards the Serbian audience, that I am a friend of the Serbian people. That other people try to portray me as an enemy, that's fine, and that happens also to many of our colleagues. But we want this to succeed. We want Serbia to be part of this Europe that we believe in. But I also say two more things. To my fellow citizens in the Netherlands, I say, you don't need to be as much in love with this region as I am. Just look at your own interests. And to the Serbian citizens, I say the same. You don't need to do it, as Irena also said, for us, or because I want it, or because other people want it. You need to do it because you want a better society, a better country. So I basically say the same thing to people in Amsterdam as people in Belgrade. Look at your interests. And it is in our interest to enlarge the family and to have Serbia in our family of democracies. And it's also in the interest of Serbian people to get that better country. And if that results in membership, well, okay, we'll see. But that should be the trajectory to move on. So, well, just wanted to say that to be very clear, because there will be a lot of comments and so on. But this is not something that you do for Europe or for us or for us. You do it for yourself, to get a better country.
Thank you for this message. Ms. Joveva, the European Parliament and you personally have been very vocal about democracy in Serbia. You have also put the candidacy of Serbian students for the Sakharov Prize. Why don't we hear more such voices from different EU institutions? So why isn't the same rhetoric being used by the Commission or some other EU institutions?
Well, I actually feel that we have more and more voices that are starting to realize that the situation is so serious and deteriorating, actually, that it's impossible to be neutral anymore, or to, you know, turn the head or the eyes back from or away from it. So, I mean, I can understand maybe some colleagues. I know that it's probably easier. It would be probably easier for the both of us to be quiet, you know. I'm not doing this for myself, and I mean, neither of us is doing this for myself. I'm just, you know, sticking to my principles and to my values. And it's not my fault that those values are the same with the people in the streets in Serbia. If they would be the same with the leadership in Serbia, I would, I mean, probably, you know, support those values, but they are not the same. So that's not our fault that the demands of the students are the same, that the transparency has to be here, the rule of law, the democracy as such, and everything that they demand. So that's all that we are doing, actually. And I really hear more and more voices, as I said. But, you know, the political will, or the political organization as such of the state, as also my colleague Reuten said, we are not interfering into internal politics. Whatever the regime wants to say, it's not about that. We do not do that. That's the destiny or the decision that the Serbian people want to make, but they do want to make. They're showing that every day on the streets. And you know, the leadership or the authorities, the authoritarian regime is not letting them. But we are not interfering in that way. We just stick to the principles and to the values, at least the ones that are aware of them and are not defending them only on paper, but on, you know, with actions and deeds. But I do feel more and more also support and understanding, also from the Commission's side. The rhetoric is changed a lot. I'm still, you know, expecting a little bit more, especially from the president of the Commission, but still, I don't hear the dear Alexander as much or at all anymore. So that's probably also good in regarding to that the leadership of the Commission also starts to respect the principles and the values that they so proudly promote, you know, not only on paper, but with deeds.
Thank you. Ms. Mandić, how do you see what the EU should do when it comes to the rising authoritarianism in Serbia? You have mentioned before the need to insist on implementing the reforms, not just adopting them and seeing the results. Anything else you might add?
Yeah, I will be really brief because I'm aware that we are also running out of time. The question is not easy, obviously, and I would say maybe one or two additional ideas or proposals. I think that what Irena did and what, for example, the two MPs who were in Novi Sad, who actually came to the protests in Novi Sad, that made an impact. So every type of act where we can see that you say we see you, so we see you, the citizens, I think that's really valuable. And you probably know how many, shares Irena's speeches in the European Parliament had. And so that is, I think, really easy and really human and really good way to battle this 33% of support for EU accession that we have. So I think more communication with the citizens. I'm aware that, I don't know, the president of the Commission cannot do that, but, members of the Parliament can, some other organs can. So communication, not only because the perception is that EU is communicating only with Vučić, only with the government, that this is the only address for them. And I think that's really a problem that can be solved in a way, not maybe to solve it perfectly, because obviously EU has to communicate with the government, but also EU, with the resolution from February 2024, said this legitimacy of this government is questionable because it's actually, the government was elected by the parliament and actually the elections from December 2023 are result of, I think now that I will quote, that they are the result of the systematic misuse of the institutions and media in order to gain undue advantage in the election. So I think that all that leads us to one and only conclusion, that the EU needs to communicate more, as I said, with the citizens, through media, through possible channels, and also in order to keep that impartiality, that I think it's really important to keep that impartiality, to really put all chips on free and fair elections, because of course the EU cannot say Vučić yes, this opposition party no, or students yes, so we will elect definitely. But I think that EU can be really peaceful with its own principles if all chips are down on free and fair elections. Because I think if the EU doesn't do that right now, the EU will have another bigger problem when we get the results of the another stolen elections. So is EU going to accept those results, or is it going to say, no, these are not valid results, we think that the opposition won or the students won? So I think that, I feel this like a little bit of hesitation to be more harsh with the request regarding to free and fair elections, but I really see this as a question of all questions, and I think that's really safe place for EU to intervene.
Thank you very much. Now we open the floor to the questions from the audience. Let us begin with one question from the Young Leaders group. I'm expecting them to get the mic, and you can prepare your other questions in the meantime.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Nikola from North Macedonia. I would like to return the panel back to the question on conditionality. It's more of a legal and a political question. And back in a certain stage in my master thesis writing, I read the entire progress reports from 2004 until now. I feel that accession was much more predictable when it came to the conditionality, when the conditionality was clear, as in what the member states were expected to do in terms of reforms, in terms of what they need to achieve. So is there such a way that we can modify, through the European Parliament mechanisms, to make it clear what does the EU expect from candidate countries to achieve for things that are outside of the acquis. So rule of law, democracy, protection of minority rights, protection of human rights. Because in 2018, the Parliament passed a resolution that called on the Commission to submit an act, a document that regulates minority rights within the EU acquis, but so far the Commission has not done that. So how can we progress on this front?
Can we get an answer immediately for someone? Is someone volunteering? Or should I be the one to volunteer you? To make you volunteers? Okay. Mr. Blockmans, maybe? You're the first one, so.
Sure. Well, I don't think it's such a mystery anymore as to what the conditions really are. And there's a bit of tradition that has accrued over time, of course. And even if the body of law still continues to grow, the opening benchmarks for each of the chapters based on a screening process which matches domestic legislation and the gap that needs to be plugged in order to align fully with the EU acquis, should have made clear exactly what those conditions are. Whether they are transparently communicated to all people, not outside observers, is a different matter. That I'm not discussing that. But the problem arises, of course, when individual member states put extra conditions on the table which are not acquis-based, which are identity, historical, security, based. There should be a framework, I think, to much more clearly separate the wheat from the chaff, and not to let the EU enlargement process, the formal mechanisms, be clogged up by these issues which belong to be settled outside of the process, either by the EU in a facilitated dialogue. It's not going anywhere, I have the feeling. Or indeed, through outside mechanisms, whether that's United Nations based, OSCE based, or Council of Europe based with its Venice Commission, etc. There are plenty of other expert bodies that, or indeed experts that can help resolve those types of issues.
Thank you. I saw some hands previously here, like Donika, Vlada, and then who has the mic?
Thank you. Is it working? Yeah. Donika Emini from Kosovo. Thanks for this brilliant discussion. We talked a lot about conditionality, and we talked about a lot about the Commission part. And we didn't talk a lot about the member states, because we have a time frame. Time frame is very ambitious, but the politicians from the EU, but also from the member states, speak differently to our audience from their audience. Because, for instance, Macron in Tirana, he gave a very ambitious deadline for Albania's membership to the EU, but no one in France talked about it, and Macron doesn't talk about it in France. So my fear is that everything will go well with the Commission, the box will be ticked, but then we will be stuck with ratifications. So my question is, what are you doing with the member states? Members of the parliament, are you talking to your own national parliaments? Because we know that Netherlands is one of the naysayers, but also how do we address the French issue, 3/5 in the chambers in the parliament or the referendum? And if we hit a wall and this ratification process lasts for 10 years, whatever, are we prepared for what's going to happen? What will this discussion be after 3 years and enlargement will not happen? Are we going to gradual accession and then deal with technicalities until we die? So how is it? Are we prepared for what's going to happen if it doesn't happen?
Thank you. Well, let's gather a couple of more questions. Vlada over there.
Thank you very much. Vladimir Međak, European Movement in Serbia, and former chief lawyer in Serbian EU accession negotiation team. I would like to come back to Serbia. Our problem here, when it comes to public opinion, is about mixed messages that we get from the EU, and it's all about the values. The biggest problem and downfall of support started when EU stopped defending its own values. When a candidate country prime minister says that ruling party of Serbia shares values with the Communistic Party of China, and nobody reacts from the EU, that's a message. When in 1 year, last year, we have 97% of all public procurement, that's 7 billion euros, spent outside of the public procurement law, and European Commission says that there was progress because actually the public procurement law was further aligned, even though it's not implemented. That's a message that EU doesn't care. The moment EU started sending messages that somebody cares, and I would like to thank you from European Parliament, because you actually saved the face of EU before Ms. Kos came, and she continued. This actually started to change opinion in Serbia. However, even in this report, which is very blunt, we have mixed messages because we don't have, for instance, in the strategy, we do not have recommendation to open cluster 3, but we have it in Serbian country report, which is unprecedented. I am following EU reports since 2004, since I started working for Serbian government, and this never happened. And this kind of distortion of reality is a result of SNS being a member of EPP. And for 10 years, Serbia talked to the EU only through EPP members and representatives from EPP. You said you cannot interfere in Serbian politics. This is not Serbian politics. I don't see Serbia joining with the SNS. I don't see that in any case, in any scenario. So until SNS is gone, Serbia cannot step in. And things in Serbia cannot change until SNS has at least covert support of EPP. Do you see EPP doing anything about it, at least, I don't know, freezing its membership, if not kicking it out of EPP membership? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's get one more question. I saw one hand over there even previously, so let's give this one hand an advantage. Over there, the center.
Hello, everybody. My name is Alexander Michevsky. I come from North Macedonia. First, I just want to be a little critical because out of 1 hour and 15 minutes, I think we were left with only 7 minutes of asking questions, which I don't think is enough. However, let me jump over to the question. So the report for North Macedonia by Thomas Weitz noted that Macedonia must open up its archives of the former secret service, UDBA and KOS. And my question is in that direction. How realistic is the fact that from certain countries, intelligence agencies, as well as certain elements from the intelligence agencies of the candidate countries are trying to stop the EU enlargement and or just hamper it at least? How realistic is that? Thank you.
Okay. Let's get one more question. Okay, well, North Macedonia wins tonight, obviously. Oh.
Thank you very much. My name is George Pavlov from Serbia, and I'm also honored to be a member of the BSc Young Leaders. Now, before I start, I would just take a quick moment to thank Ms. Joveva for being a leading voice in the European Union for the Serbian students and the Serbian people fighting for true European values of democracy, rule of law, and transparency. Now, my question is directed to you and to Mr. Reuten as members of the European Parliament, and it's related to the latest visit of the Commission President, Ms. von der Leyen, to Belgrade, where she, as you said, changed her rhetoric, but also made a landmark pledge to include Serbia into the EU's joint gas procurement plan to mitigate the effect of EU sanctions on Russia and help Serbia essentially achieve higher levels of energy independence. Can we expect more overtures like this from Brussels to Belgrade? And how much can they help improve the EU's reputation in Serbia? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's now try to answer all these questions. And we'll see if in the end we have more time for a couple of more. So what about member states? Who would like to take that question?
On the rhetoric, yeah, you are here with members of parliament, and I say the same thing whether I'm in Belgrade or Amsterdam or Berlin. But you are right. Consistency in the messaging and also consistency in the follow-up to the message, because of course President Macron can deliver a fantastic speech in Tirana, but for him it's the same as for candidate countries. If actions do not meet the promises, then it's very damaging, and it actually can worsen the situation. Now, you are coming from Kosovo, and I think that also on that, I mean, what the member states are doing there is completely incomprehensible, because we have a very clear process in the treaties on how to deal with a membership application. And it was very fast, rightfully so, that the European Commission processed the membership application of Ukraine and Moldova. But the one from Kosovo is still on the shelf. So both the Commission, but also some member states, have a responsibility there. Because, and that links to the point that Steven, I think, made in response to the question on the acquis, the problem is that we should not bring things to acquis level where they are not rightfully there. So that happened, unfortunately, in the case of North Macedonia, but also the processes that Steven hinted on, the normalization dialogue and so on, are also instruments to hijack progress. Because if you are in a normalization dialogue that has been made conditional for a next step, then there are also actors who can actively jeopardize that dialogue in order to block progress. And the same is happening. It's different. You cannot compare the two, but the same is happening in the situation between the member states, Bulgaria and North Macedonia. Briefly on the conditionality issue, I think no, on the gas procurement. Can I take that one
sure.
as well? Because that all make me laugh a little bit. Because there have been countless moments or offers by the EU to solve this issue. This issue could have been solved any day. There's a choice. Like some member states are making a choice. Hungary and Slovakia consciously decided not to buy less gas or energy from Russia, no, to buy more. And I think that here you have an interesting comparison with a country like Moldova. Moldova was in a very difficult situation when it came to energy. They said to the EU, we cannot change this overnight, but we want to get rid of the Russian energy, but we cannot do it overnight. And they made a plan, and they executed the plan together with the European Union. Now, I am very much in favor of indeed doing a similar thing with other countries. We want to help, but it's also up to the decision makers in the respective countries, being candidate members or member states, to take responsibility for getting less dependent on Russian energy. And I'm in favor of these kind of plans to help, but it has to come from two sides.
Thank you, Ms. Joveva. There's a question for you, and I can also, forward you the question about European values. Like, did the EU stop defending its own values?
I will try to maybe answer to all of the questions, but I will be quick. I was a journalist, so I know how to do it in a few minutes, just broadly. Regarding
so you know my pain here as the moderator.
Regarding the conditionality, I mean, it's clear. It should be clear. But when you add something bilaterally, I mean, if Slovenia and Croatia would be doing that, probably Croatia would still not be
very good example
in the European Union. So it's to me, it's unacceptable. To me, it's really unacceptable that some candidate countries, especially the Macedonian state, got those conditions that they got. But now, I mean, I see that it's hard also for Commissioner Kos, but it is what it is now. It happened in the previous mandate. So I don't see actually a solution here, anything less than do the constitution change, unfortunately. What happens if nothing happens? I think everyone is asking, I mean, at least the ones that understand the situation, the same question. Nobody knows. I think the main thing here is just to not make promises if you cannot deliver them. I hope that some things were learned from the past regarding that, but I don't know. Regarding the mixed messages and the EPP and SNS in Serbia, as far as I know, they are still considering
suspension.
SNS being a member of EPP, but I'm not sure what's happening because the decisions is taking quite a long, I think a month or so, so I have no idea what's happening, but otherwise I agree with what you said regarding the SNS and EPP relationship. Regarding the intelligence agencies, I don't know if I can answer actually concretely here. I mean, I'm too young for UDBA, archives and everything else, so I don't even see it, you know, as, to me, it's, I won't even say. But what the intelligence agencies are doing, I mean, nobody should know what they're doing. If somebody knows, then they're not doing their job the way So, I mean, I see this as a political, the politicians in the region, also in the Macedonian state, you know, using this situation over and over and over again. I think that's also the main problem. So they are also the ones who are using also the Bulgaria issue, some of the politicians in Macedonian state. So I think that's also a problem because they are not focusing on the Macedonian nation or everyone else living there, but only on themselves. So that's also homework that for the politicians there. I'm speaking about actually everyone or most of them. And just energy, I mean, I think Reuten said what I also wanted to, but just to thank for the kind words. Thank you very much. I hope I was short enough.
Thank you. If you would like to add something very briefly, Mr. Blockmans and Ms. Mandić.
Yeah, very briefly to your question, which is excellent, because the political landscape is difficult going forward in the member states. What happens if ratification takes forever? Is it going to be Canada country forever while having negotiated everything without any of the benefits other than the gradual integration bits? Our proposal on paper, published by CEPS, couple of weeks ago, do look it up, was to slap or to allow the European Commission basically to take privilege and to stick a nominated member state label on that candidate country, having fulfilled all of the conditions, met all, you know, cleared all the benchmarks, etc., jumped through all the hoops and gotten the support of the large majority of member states. It should not be up to one single member state or two to hold up, you know, the entire process in the interest of the entire European Union and indeed that Canada country. Those benefits should be, which are normally reserved for acceding countries that have fully ratified their accession treaties and the moment that they actually enter the European Union, which is just a couple of months, to socialize them in the institutions, etc., that could be much longer. You can make use of that time, you know, by allowing at least those similar types of institutional benefits to be bestowed upon that nominated member state. That is not to say that that status should be indefinite. There should be a 2-year review clause mechanism, basically, which puts the onus again, or a 1-year review clause, which poses the onus again and the pressure again on that holdout member state blocking the entire process. And hopefully things will resolve themselves.
Well, thank you very much. We are now, unfortunately, out of time, so we have to conclude here. So thank you very much for following us, and of course to the panelists for their time. You know, it's not a phrase, but I really think that this panel could have lasted for probably 2 or 3 hours. It probably wouldn't be so boring to the audience. So thank you once again. See you tomorrow.